In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32, one of the most baffling things said there, it says that Samson is a man of faith. He is a hero of faith. Faith is one of the key words in Christianity. It's a word we all use. It's a word that we claim to know and understand and cling to. We are a people of faith. We possess faith. We are called to be faithful. And Jesus told his disciples that faith was something that could be somehow measured. They said, Lord, why were we not able to cast this demon out? In Matthew 17, and Jesus told them, it's because of the littleness of your faith. The size of it is small. And then he went on to tell those who had little faith that great faith was measured in comparison to a very little seed. Oh, your faith is very little, but great faith is measured by this very little seed. And if their faith was like the faith of a mustard seed, they could move mountains. Mustard seeds are very small, but apparently as God measures faith, sometimes ours is significantly smaller. Which leads me to conclude that even though faith is one of the foundational things that we talk about, or one of the foundational things that we declare and identify ourselves with, sometimes you need to silence your devices or people will make an example of you. I've concluded that faith is a confusing thing. And I concluded that originally because of Samson. Samson is, look up knucklehead in the dictionary, and you'll go down under synonyms there, you'll find Samson. He is your perfect knucklehead, just a guy driven by his flesh, following after the compulsions of his own feelings, just doing whatever he wants to do. And yet, in spite of all of that, Samson had faith. And so I'm like, maybe I don't understand faith. Maybe I don't fully comprehend it. Because oftentimes we want to connect faith with morality, or we want to connect faith with someone who really has their doctrine together. Or we want to connect faith with the people that do amazing things and are seen by people and write books and draw large crowds. That those are people of faith because they're moral, or because they have great doctrine, or because their lives are just really driven in deep in prayer, and those are the people of faith. And then I look at Samson, and he's a knucklehead. Yet he has these moments where he has great confidence and belief in God. And so maybe the story of Samson is teaching me a little bit more about understanding faith. It's one of our most common principles, but it's a hard thing to grasp. It's defined simply as the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. Hope in itself is an expression of faith. We don't hope in things that we don't believe will come to pass. That's not what hope means. Hope is a positive expectation and something that we already believe will come to pass. That's hope. I'm hoping in something. I know it is going to come to pass. It's a conviction, a proven certainty of things we can't see. That's faith. And Samson was a man who at times was assured that the things he hoped in would come to pass. This man had confidence when the Spirit of the Lord came upon him to do what God purposed him to do. He was convinced in his heart that the unseen would prove true, that this lion would be killed, that these Philistines would be killed, that he would conquer, that he'd be able to break the ropes and the binds that were upon him. He believed with great confidence. And so it says in Hebrews 11, verses 33 through 34, it says of Samson and of these other guys, through faith they conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, and put foreign armies to flight. These people had moments where God's Spirit came upon them, and they acted in faith in such an incredible way, and yet much of their lives are marked with weakness or fear or bad doctrine or bad parenting. It also mentions Gideon, Barak, Jephthah, in the same verse as Samson. We've been learning about these guys for several weeks, and God has done mighty works through them. God convicted their heart, which in Gideon's case took a lot of work. It took a lot of work for Gideon to believe. And with that miraculous spiritual proof that God put in there, they went forward with great assurance and they did mighty things. But as we have already seen, these heroes of faith were not necessarily heroes of doctrine. Gideon is like, hey, wow, God's really moving through me. I think I will take all of your gold and make an idol. It's an ephod, so it's like something that we use in worshiping God, but I'm going to set it up and people will worship it. He didn't really get it. They weren't heroes of morality. These guys had many wives. Samson was just bouncing around from woman to woman. They were not heroes of wisdom, Samson especially, and Jephthah. They weren't heroes of parenthood. We see that in the fruits of Gideon's children. They weren't heroes of obedience, but they are heroes of faith. And so we have a whole chapter dedicated to the heroes of faith. And I look through my Bible, and I can't find any chapters in the Bible dedicated to the heroes of doctrine. I can't find any chapters in the Bible dedicated to the heroes of morality. I can't find any chapters dedicated to the heroes of wisdom or the heroes of parenthood or the heroes of obedience. I don't find those chapters. I only find this chapter about the heroes of faith. And that's because faith is a big deal to God. It is a big deal to God because I believe it's simply because faith is something that God does. You have faith. Did you muster it up in your own strength? Then I would think that maybe that's not faith. Because when I see faith in the Bible, I see God giving it to people powerfully and them embracing that confidence that He brings upon them and moving forward in that. Faith is something that God does. And God likes things that God does. And God likes it when people respond to what He is doing and He sees His work happening in them. And so when people display faith, they are displaying in them something that God is doing. And so God likes faith. Unlike the things that the pastors you hear on TV teach you, the ones who fly around in their private jets and drive Bentleys, faith is not a work of the flesh. They would tell you that it is. They would tell you that it's a work of the flesh. It's not an issue of super positive thinking or believing or confessing. They would tell you it is a work. It's not a lie that we say out loud against the reality that's hidden in our hearts and our heads. That kind of faith is not faith. That's called optimism. It's a work of human will. It's a work, and it's meant to earn a blessing from God. If I do this work, then I will earn a blessing from God. God will be bound to respond to this work that I am doing in my will. So in its truest essence, that form of faith is the law. Because the law said, you do these things, then God will bless you. You don't do these things, then God will not bless you. That's the law. Cursings and blessings. Not the law that Jesus fulfilled and transformed, but rather the law that says, if you do this right, God will be pleased with you. To fulfill the law in Jesus says that Jesus did everything right. And God is pleased with him. Therefore, God is pleased with you. And you're like, well, what did I do? You received the forgiveness of Jesus. You embraced the grace that He's given to you. You've just experienced forgiveness by faith. That's what you did. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot of work. It's not work. It's faith. And God put it in you to be able to believe that you are forgiven and that you have received freely this grace. God put that in you. In the days of the judges, God had a work to do, and He chose for Himself instruments, men through whom He could punish Israel's enemies, but not necessarily good men or upright men or devout men. And we want them to be that. We want these guys to be just those people we can look up to, you can go to for counsel and advice, and that they would be our great examples, and that they would know everything, they would know all the right stuff. And yet God says, no, that's not who I'm going to choose. I'm actually going to choose knuckleheads like Gideon and Jephthah and Samson. And I'm going to put my power in these guys, and I'm going to do my work in them. And they might not be smart, or they might not be wise, or they might not be great parents, or they might not really fully understand doctrine, or they might not have wisdom. But you know what they do have? They have the ability to believe in the faith that I'm putting in them and acting in it. That's what they have. You know what? God likes that. God likes that. In chapter 13, we learned about the birth of Samson. He was a Nazarite from birth to death. That is, his life was given under the oath of a vow. But God makes him to be a Nazarite of great contradiction. Great contradiction. God purposes this Nazarite to do things which would disqualify his Nazarite vow over and over again. God's like, I want you to be a Nazarite. Don't you dare eat a grape. Don't you dare drink wine. Don't you dare cut your hair. Don't you dare touch a dead body. Oh, wait a minute. You're going to need to touch a lot of dead bodies because you're going to be killing a lot of men. He is a Nazarite of great contradiction. According to number 6, a Nazarite was set apart to draw close to God, to separate himself from the comforts of the world. I don't think Samson really did that, separating himself from the comforts of the world. He wasn't to cut his hair. He wasn't to drink wine or even eat a grape or a raisin. He wasn't to touch anything dead. He wasn't even allowed to be near someone who might be dead. And if by chance he's out in public and he's standing by someone who drops dead 4 feet from him, he has to go to the temple, cut his hair, and start all over again. If the vow is accidentally broken, that's what he had to do. And normally it was for a certain predetermined time period, but for Samson, it was for life. And the problem is, Samson's circumstances are quite different. God raised him up for a purpose and empowered him to do things which would force him to break his vow over and over again. Samson was his tool, his blunt instrument, to punish the Philistines. And that's his purpose. It's right there in verse 4. That is God's purpose. Why did Samson want to be with this Philistine girl? It's so wrong. That is so wrong. But God put it in him. This was God's purpose. I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to put him in the midst of the Philistines for my purpose. And then I'm going to put him in there and I'm going to have him exposed to circumstances that rile him up. And when he's riled up, I'm going to put my spirit on him and let him go. And I'm going to do that again and again and again. God had a plan for him. And it was just to punish people. And to do that, Samson had to be a man who was willing to walk forward in the faith that God gave him. God's purpose for Samson was stated in Judges 14, verse 4. God was putting Samson in position as an opportunity against the Philistines. Obviously, God is the one who put in Samson this desire to go to Timnah and see this girl, and God wanted him in that place. He was placing his instrument where it needed to be. If Samson were a devout, obedient servant of God who was knowledgeable of the law and knowledgeable of his Nazarite vow beyond what to eat and what to drink, he would not be in this position. He wouldn't go. But Samson was who Samson was, and God used those limitations for his purposes. Picking up in verse 5, then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came towards him roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. And although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. And so this is the first account where the Spirit of the Lord rushes upon Samson in power, that we have record of. Any other man would have seen the lion coming, and he would have what? He would have run. You know he would have run. I would have run. But Samson was given full assurance and conviction that he would defeat this lion with his bare hands and without hesitation. He acted in faith because he was convinced. He was positive that God was giving him the victory. And before he knew it, he was killing this animal. And the moment that animal was dead, he broke his vow. Any other man would have declared this exciting victory to his family. He would have run back, hey, Mom and Dad, I just killed the lion. But no, not his mom and dad. They had raised him to be a Nazirite. So he killed the lion. He's like, oh, mom and dad are going to be hacked. I broke my Nazirite vow. He didn't tell them. Just went on his way. However, if this was the first time the Spirit came upon Samson in power, it was probably with great purpose. Like, why did Samson kill a lion? Why did God arrange that? Why did God empower him to do that? I believe God did it with great purpose. God was in this moment showing Samson what it was like to experience such strength and confidence. Samson had to know this is not the kind of thing normal men can do. When it was done, he had to have known this was a God thing. This is what it's like to go forward in the power of God and act in it. Samson wasn't just some overconfident, dumb guy who thought he could do anything. He was a guy who was learning what it meant to fight powerfully when God's Spirit came upon him. Sometimes God does things simply to remind us of what he's able to do. Lord, why'd you do this thing in my life? What is the purpose of this? What does this mean? We're always looking for that purpose. What does this mean? What are you showing me? And sometimes he's just showing us what he's capable of. Lord, why did you open this door and do this amazing thing and show yourself to me? And why did I see this miraculous thing happen or experience it? Sometimes it's just so we know what he can do. Just showing you what I can do so that you can thank me and worship me and glorify me. And then the next time when something comes along, you can count on me. With God, defeating a lion is kind of on par with the destruction of 1,000 Philistines. For God, it wasn't a big deal. God was the power in this. I can step on one ant just as easily as I can step on 100 ants. God's like, I can step on one lion as easily as I can step on 1,000 Philistines. For God, who's omnipotent, it wasn't an issue. The effort is the same. And Samson will respond in the future with the same level of confidence. One lion, all right. 1,000 Philistines, all right. What do I have to kill them with? Here's the jawbone of a donkey. I'm not supposed to touch dead things. Well, pick it up anyway. You've never been one for obedience. And God gave him that same level of confidence for both callings, not because he was arrogant, but rather because he is recognizing the power that God is putting in him. There's a passage in Isaiah, it caught my attention recently. It's in chapter 52, verse 12. It's a reminder to me of what the Lord does. The Lord says, I've got you covered today. He says in verse 12, for you shall go out in haste. So that's him saying, you shall not go out in haste. Now I can read. So that's the Lord saying, I got you covered today. Don't go out in haste. I've got you covered today. And then he says, and you shall not go in flight. So the Lord says, I'll not let you be defeated. Don't go in flight. I've got you covered. And then it says, for the Lord will go before you. And the Lord says, I've got tomorrow covered. I've got it taken care of. I'm going before you. And then it says, and the God of Israel will be your rear guard. And the Lord says, I see what you can't see behind you. I see what's there. I got that covered. Now, the Lord has all of this stuff covered. When you walk with God, he will show you at different times in your life where he has proven himself. Where he has said to you, look, I have this covered. He's proven himself faithful, where he has manifested his power, where he has reminded us of who he is and what he has done. I'm reading in my reading this week from Experiencing God. Blackaby called these times spiritual markers, on the timeline of our life, these spiritual markers, where God showed you something, where God revealed something to you. And even as they may have had specific applications in your life, they also serve as reminders to you of that this is the kind of stuff that God is capable of. Hey, listen, I got this covered. Well, what about tomorrow? I can do that too. Didn't I prove to you that I can take care of today? Well, that proves that I can take care of tomorrow. Well, Lord, I feel defeated. I should run. No, I have you covered right here. You're not defeated. I'm on your side. Well, what about the stuff I can't see behind me? Haven't I proven to you that I have you covered here and now? Haven't I proven to you that I got tomorrow covered? Well, that is proof again that I have yesterday covered. Sometimes he shows us in the today things just so that we can say, I know what the Lord is capable of. This passage in Isaiah 52 teaches me that he has today covered. And that's a reminder that he has the battle around us covered. And that's a reminder that he also has tomorrow covered. And that's a reminder that he has your back. So Samson beat a lion. Why did he fight a lion? He beat a lion. But that would serve as a reminder that he would also be able to beat the Philistines, because this wasn't his strength. This was God's strength. Continuing on in verse 7, the punishment that God is going to bring upon the Philistines through Samson starts through this marriage, this wedding. Strange, insignificant things play into it, like this riddle about the dead lion that had honeybees in it. I really wanted to talk about that. I'm interested in honeybees. It just says after a few days he came back, and it's like, there's no way that bees would have inhabited the carcass of an animal and made honey in a few days. So I worked it all out, how long it would actually take. And then I realized that's so insignificant to what we're talking about. Deleted a whole bunch of stuff. So there was this riddle about the dead lion that had honeybees in it. 30 companions came. Philistine men were there at the wedding. And he posed this to him. If you can solve this riddle, then you have to give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you do solve it, then I have to give you 30 garments of linen and 30 changes of clothes. So when Samson's wife told these guys who were unwilling to lose the wager, and they just hounded her and threatened her life. And so finally she told them what the meaning of the riddle was. Samson was hacked. And this is where somebody pushed the button and God said, yes, this is where I have him. I have him in this place, and he's getting ready to be used. And God is going to use him. And he laid this insult upon his wife, and suddenly he had to come up with 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. When the Philistines thought that they might have to pay one linen garment apiece and one change of clothes apiece, they claimed that it would impoverish them. So this was going to be an expensive endeavor. And so Samson wasn't going to pay the wager on their terms. He's like, all right, you Philistines, I'll give you your linen garments, and I'll give you your changes of clothes. So this is the event which sparked the beginning of God's punishment upon the Philistines. Samson was angered, and God pointed him at a group of 30 Philistine men in a neighboring city. He went to this town. He killed 30 of them in the strength and confidence of the Spirit. So he went from one lion to 30 men. He took their clothes and their linen garments, and he brought them back. And this part isn't in the story, but I'm going to embellish a little bit. He brought these garments back, and I like to think that the guys he killed were wearing them. So he brings them back, and they're like torn and bloody. And it's obvious that whoever was wearing this garment a few hours ago died violently. And he gave them to him. Here you go. You win. That's my version of the story. It may not be true. Verse 19 tells us that Samson left in hot anger. So this girl that he was marrying, her dad sees him insult his daughter. He says, the only reason you guys knew the answer to my riddle is because you plowed with my heifer. And so he heard that insult. And then he took off in hot anger. So he just said, Samson doesn't want my daughter. And so he married her off to the best man. And this would spark his anger for the next event. Look down to chapter 15, verse 1. After some days, at the time of the wheat harvest, so the Philistines were growing their wheat. They're getting ready to harvest it. That's significant. Samson went to visit his wife with a young goat. And he said, I will go into my wife in the chamber, but her father would not let him go in. And her father said, I really thought you utterly hated her. So I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please take her instead. And Samson said to them, this time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm. So Samson went and caught 300 foxes. I'm sure that was miraculous, because, how do you do that? And he took torches, and he turned them tail to tail and put torches between each pair of tails. And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and set fire to the sacked grain and the standing grain, as well as the olive orchards. This was a massive economical blow upon the Philistines. Nobody's getting killed here. It's just all their food and the source of their commerce is being destroyed. Then the Philistines said, "Who has done this?" And they said, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion." And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. This must be something the Philistines did, because the 30 guys who were at the wedding, that's the threat that they laid upon her and her father. If you don't tell us the name of the riddle, we will burn you and your father. And Samson said to them, "If this is what you do, I swear I will be avenged on you. After that, I will quit." So Samson said, "I'm going to be avenged on you guys, this little group, and then I'm done. Then I'm done." He became so angry that his wife was given to another man, that 150 pairs of foxes with torches in them took off. They're not going to run a straight line. They're going to zigzag this way and that, and then there's going to be fire, and then they're going to panic, and they're going to be going every which way. I mean, they are going to be dragging those torches all over the place, the whole place, all the grain, harvested, not harvested, olive orchards, all up in flames. So when the Philistines found out that Samson did this in response to Timnah's in response to his wife's father's betrayal, they turned and burned Samson's wife, or almost wife, don't even know what to call her, the girl that he thought was really great, and her father. You see what's happening here? Remember Judges 14, verse 4? God was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. He wanted to punish them. This was his plan. And the Philistines served as a catalyst which perpetuated Samson's responses. This is what God wanted. I'm going to put him in a place where they are going to set him off. And then I'm going to put my power upon him and let him go. And that's what happened over and over again. He found this group that burned his father-in-law to be and his almost wife. And he swore vengeance. In verse 8 it says, he struck them hip and thigh with a great blow. This was a term which meant that the attack was vicious. It was a wrestling metaphor for a ferocious attack. And I don't know if he killed them, but he at least beat them up. According to his words in verse 7, Samson thought he was done. He said, "I swear it will be avenged on you, and after that I will quit." Samson thought that he was done. God was doing a work in him, and he said, "Okay, I'm done. I'm satisfied. I've avenged my offenses, so I'm done." He thought he was done, so he went and set up camp in a place called Etham and just was hanging out there. Have you ever declared that you're done with the work that God has you doing? It's like, all right, Lord, I've satisfied my personal stuff for doing this work. Sometimes I want to serve the Lord so that I feel better about myself. Or I want to serve the Lord because I feel guilty. Or I want to serve the Lord because I want people to think I'm a real spiritual person. And so we serve the Lord for a while, and we're like, okay, I'm not guilty anymore. Okay, I feel like I'm a spiritual person. I feel like people respect me. I've accomplished what I want. So now I can say, well, I'm done serving the Lord because I got what I want. Because that's what Samson did. He did this thing, he got what he wanted, then he said he was done. And sometimes we do that. I'm going to serve the Lord, and there's going to come a point where I'm just going to declare that I'm done doing this thing that I'm doing. God raised up this instrument from birth, and his mission was just getting started. He had barely begun to punish the Philistines, and then he declares, well, I'm done. I got my part out of it. I got my vengeance taken care of. The problem with Samson's plan is that it wasn't God's plan. Samson had a plan. God had a plan. God's job was not done. He was just getting started. So he was about to make arrangements to bring Samson back into the mission. Samson's like, I'm done. The Lord's like, no, I'm going to bring you back into the mission. I'm going to bring 3,000 of your countrymen to you, and they're going to tie you up, and they're going to bring you back into the mission. I want to encourage you. There are times when the thought of going forward feels unreal. We experience that, don't we? Times when the thought of going forward seems unreal. Sometimes it's marriage, sometimes it's friendship, sometimes it's ministry, sometimes it's the job, and it's just like, I'm not getting out of this what I want to get out of it anymore. And the thought of going forward seems impossible. And in all of those things, we're bound to go through dark seasons. We're bound to go through challenging times. Sometimes it's crystal clear. God confirms to you, it's time to move on. It's crystal clear. I've worked it all out. And sometimes we declare that we're done simply because, for no other reason, we've declared it. I can't even remember how many times that I've declared that I'm done. How many times have I declared, I know you think that this pastor gig is a piece of cake, give a little speech once a week, hang out in the coffee shop with your friends the rest of the week, go fishing all the time. I don't go fishing all the time. I dream about it, though. But at times, in spite of the little speech once a week, at times this gig can be difficult. And so it's probably only been about 700 or 800 times, who's counting, that I've declared, Lord, I'm done. I am done. And God has been super gracious every time because he's not done. He's not finished. He always finds me, brings me back into his work. He always convinces my heart that he's not done. I remember when I quit the basketball team in 4th grade at Grant Elementary in Muscatine, Iowa. I was on the B squad with the other husky kids. That was the politically correct term back then. Hey, I need some jeans. We'll go to Sears and get some tough skins. Make sure you get husky. Yeah. So I was on the B squad, and I hated it. It was awful. If you told me, Chad, let's go play basketball, I'd be like, I hate that. So I decided that I was going to quit. And the coach told me, little 4th grader, little chubby guy who can't play basketball, I get this coach speech. If you quit once, it just gets easier to quit the next time, and then easier after that. Pretty soon you just lose the ability to commit. I'm a 4th grader on the B squad, and I hate it. And I got this inspirational speech. And I've quit a lot of things. I quit the B squad of basketball there at Grant Elementary. I quit marching band my freshman year of high school because they wouldn't let me challenge to play snare drum. No, you're a freshman. You have to carry the bass drum. I'm like, I'm a better drummer than your drummers. Let me challenge. No, I quit. Bought a drum set, started a punk band. 1986, I quit Fairway Grocery. I quit the mission field in 1991. I quit delivering water in 1992. And then in 1994, I got married, and God plopped us down in the most quittable job statistically in the United States. The most quittable job, statistically speaking, in the United States. Being a house parent in a group home was the highest turnover career back in 95, 96, in that time period. And there we were, dumb newlyweds, jumping in over our heads. And God taught us commitment. He taught us what it meant to press on, even when we thought it was time to declare ourselves done. We are instruments in his hands, all of us who believe in him. We are instruments in his hands, and he prepares us for the work that he has. And it may not always be glamorous. Do you think Samson's work was glamorous? Samson, all you can do is believe in the power I put in you. That's all you really can do. So I'm going to use you to kill Philistines and punish them. That was his job. God used him for who he was. Well, he uses us for who we are. He uses us for the people that he has made us to be. And he intends to use us for his work. And I pray that even when we think that we've finished our part, when our satisfaction kind of comes to a temporary end, when our selfish personal part of why we did something comes to an end, I pray that he would graciously come and collect us, tie ropes behind our backs if he needs to, like with Samson, and just graciously lead us back to the place where his work is. Next week we'll pick up in Samson's story where this very thing happens. God arranges for Samson to come back into the mission, and when he does, the Spirit of the Lord will rush upon him again, and this time single-handedly with donkey bones in his hands. He kills 1,000 Philistines while 3,000 of his fellow countrymen stand there gawking with mouths wide open, afraid. Why are you killing the Philistines? They rule over us. We are in so much trouble. I like that. That's nice. It's just kind of calm and peaceful. Now think about that. You know, the level of ADD that I experience is unbelievable. I've often considered, closing this in soundproof and putting up a two-sided mirror here so that you could see me, but I wouldn't see any of you or hear you. So you could leave. Think about that for a moment. Your quitting point could fall one step short from God's greatest opportunity. Because that's what Samson did. His quitting point it was just one step away from God's greatest victory through him. How many times have you quit on one line at the grocery store because there's a shorter one over there, and you're like, And then you get over here and it says cashier in training, and they're crying, and there's a bunch of produce like spilled all over the floor, and then you look and that line is suddenly long. How many times do we do that? We make that decision. Some things must be quit. If God's not obviously working in it, then it's probably time to shut it down, move on, and figure out what he does want you to do. We should never press on and do things simply because we've always done it that way. We've always done it that way is the worst reason in the world to do anything if you can't add real substance to it. Forcing something to happen the same way over and over again simply because it used to be a good thing results in tedious, fruitless labors of useless tradition. So we should identify times when we should quit. But I pray that we would be zealous to identify when not to quit, in spite of what we've declared. May we be willing conduits for faith. Not faith that we muster up in ourselves, but the faith that God puts upon us because he wants to use us. May we know his confidence. May we be convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that his power is his power when it is his power. May we just know beyond a shadow of a doubt that what we do is his power, not our will. May we be in his hands, the instruments that he intends us to be.